Today is March 2nd, 2023. Why do we even use maps? On a map, the magnitude of the globe, our current location, and our desired destination are all readily apparent. There are occurrences that can take place at various periods that alter these maps. Today, the Ukrainian army was successful in shifting the battlefield's orientation once more. The Russian forces sustained a significant amount of casualties. The significance of this incident was brought to light by intelligence reports from the UK. So what exactly took place in Ukraine? If you're ready, let's get this party started. The Ukrainian armed forces have been engaged in combat for some time now in an effort to free Russian-occupied territory. The last few days have seen a significant uptick in the intensity of this. The Russian military has started to lose control over the territories that they have occupied. The Ukrainian army is victorious in the battle. The Russian military is compelled to withdraw from all of the territory it has gained in Ukraine. This is as a result of the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces are currently engaging in very successful extraordinary activity. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense frequently releases statements regarding their expectations regarding the outcomes of these confrontations. These statements demonstrate how precarious the situation currently is for the Russian forces. The utterances made today have caused Putin a great deal of distress. The Russian fighters were unsuccessful. According to a map that was made public today by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, Russia has sustained extremely significant losses in the Olyr district of the Danes Alost. The battlegrounds have once more shifted in favor of Ukraine as a result of recent developments in an effort to occupy more land. Russia organized military activities on multiple attacks were carried out by the Russian forces in 71 different regions, including KK, Lyman, Bakhmut, Nevsky, and DVA. However, the Ukrainian force was able to repel each and every one of these assaults. Hundreds of soldiers from the Russian army were killed or injured. As a result of these activities, it has been suggested that 660 Russian soldiers lost their lives as a result of these operations. An estimated 150,000 Russian fighters have lost their lives so far. Everyone in Ukraine is talking about the story of this hero. Warriors step forward to save the day during the darkest of times, and their actions alter everything. Heroes had the potential to emerge victorious in times of extreme peril and during times of armed. One brave individual was all it took to turn things around. In the Ukrainian armed forces, everyone in Ukraine is discussing the heroic deeds of this individual. The hero's gripping accounts of battle are truly remarkable in their own right. If you are prepared, let's get this party started. Eugene was an exceptional student who achieved a lot. After completing his education, he intended to give back to his nation by fighting in the military. But by the time he received his diploma, his nation was in a state of emergency. Eugene had the intention of protecting his nation from the impending Russian onslaught. Therefore, he enlisted in the military. His time in the military was very productive and he advanced through the ranks very rapidly. When Russia first started its invasion of Ukraine, Eugene was one of the most accomplished lieutenants in the Ukrainian army. He was serving in the Ukrainian army at the time. They were victorious over the Russian forces. On many occasions, following the Russian army's incursion into Ukraine, tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens voluntarily enlisted in the Ukrainian. Oleg, Eugene's father, was one of those individuals. They were both overcome with feeling when they learned that Oleg would be leaving soon for his deployment. Ivan Serko, a prominent Cossack general from the 17th century, inspired the naming of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade, which he served in during his time in the service. Eugene, a successful businessman and Oleg's son, was given leadership of this brig. Both the father and the boy were fighting together against the Russian invasion on the same front. Together, they took part in a number of different activities during these operations. They were victorious over the Russian forces on a number of occasions together in the conflicts they battled. They were successful in driving the occupiers out of 3 different towns. They went through a lot of feelings during these procedures. However, the feelings of the woman who was waiting for them at home were even more intense at home. Oleg's wife and Eugene's mother were looking forward to seeing them when they arrived. She was extremely concerned, but also extremely pleased of herself. She never stopped praying for the end of the conflict so that her husband and son could return home safely. Throughout each conflict on the battleground, Oleg and Eugene kept her in their thought. The Ukrainian military was successful. The liberation of Kyiv by the Ukrainian army was characterized by a series of extremely difficult battles. The Ukrainian army was successful in their mission as a direct consequence of this operation. During the course of the operation, the Russian forces lost a significant number of soldiers. Lieutenant Eugene had a significant impact on the outcome of this mission. During this mission, he made a choice that ended up being instrumental in preventing the loss of the lives of many other warriors. A missile assault was initiated by the Russian army against Ukrainian soldiers who were advancing with tanks at the time. At the precise moment when these projectiles were aimed at the tanks, Lieutenant Eugene made a decisive. Tanks belonging to the Ukrainian forces moved forward into the surrounding forest. At this point, 3 tanks moved through the gap in the woods. These trees had a very sizable hole dug in them by fighters from Ukraine. In point of fact, this crater was excavated in order to eliminate the Russian tanks that were approaching. However, Eugene made the astute choice to lower the Ukrainian army tanks into which made it possible for the soldiers to evade the missile assault. However, they were unable to escape the tanks for several hours. Reinforcements for the Ukrainian troops arrived and they immediately destroyed the Russian missiles. Following that, the tanks that were buried in the pit were brought to the surface, and the warriors were saved because Eugene made this choice. All 3 tanks and the personnel inside of them were. It turned out that one of these warriors was actually his father. The Ukrainian commanders had high praise for the lieutenants' brilliant achievement and meticulous planning throughout this operation. Within the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces, Lieutenant Eugene was revered as a warrior in a different engagement. He was successful in eliminating 16 Russian fighters with a machine. Because of this incredible achievement in battle, he became a celebrity. The lieutenant was held in extremely high regard by the Ukrainian military. The lieutenant freed many locations and was responsible for the survival of dozens of soldiers. However, during one procedure, things did not go as planned. A significant conflict with the Russian forces took place in the vicinity of the town of Pok. During the course of several hours of battling, a large number of Russian soldiers lost their lives. However, the Russian army received reinforcements from other fronts. Rockets were among the various types of ammunition that the new soldiers carried with them. Oleg, the father of Lieutenant, was the first person who realized that the Russian army was going to initiate a rocket attack. This realization came as a complete surprise to Lai. Oleg was a former colonel in the Ukrainian army before he resigned. He was exceptionally skilled with machine firearms and sniper rifles. Oleg launched an assault on the Russian fighters in order to stop the oncoming rocket fire. He fought valiantly until the machine gun in his hand fired its final round, but he was ultimately, after learning that his father had passed away. Lieutenant Eugene and the soldiers under his command refused to hand over the village of Paki to the Russians, earning the respect of all of Ukraine. In the process, a drone piloted by Ukrainians was fired down close to Moscow, according to statements made by the governor of the Moscow region. A drone that was most likely being used in an attempt to attack civilian infrastructure has just, after the Defense Ministry reported shooting down 2 Ukrainian drones in southern Russia, Andrei Vra took the podium to discuss the incident. The Ukrainian government denies any involvement in the assaults that took place inside of Russia. The energy conglomerate Gazprom in Russia runs a facility not far from the town of Gobaovo, which is approximately 100 kilometers, 62 miles from Moscow. This is the location where the drone plummeted, according to statements made by Gazprom to the state-controlled news agency, RIA Novosti in Russia. The company's activities in the Kologner region have not been disrupted, according to a message that was posted on Telegram by Mr. Vorabath. The target of the drone in Kolana was presumably a civilian infrastructure facility, which was not damaged. There have been no injuries or property damage reported on the ground. Investigations are currently being conducted by the Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, as well as other appropriate authorities. He noted images that have been circulated by Russian media and government authorities show a damaged drone lying in a snow-covered field in front of a birch tree forest. The land in the immediate vicinity of the Gazprom building is densely. The appearance of the unmanned aerial vehicle is identical to that of the UJ-22 Airborne, which was manufactured by the Ukrainian company UKR Jet. According to UKR Jet, the vehicle has a capacity of 800 kilometers, which is sufficient for it to travel from Ukraine to the region of Kona. There are no previous matches for the picture when it is viewed in reverse, which indicates that it was just created. A picture of the drone was shared on Twitter by Antonchenko, an advisor to the Minister of Interior Affairs in Ukraine. It is further than 500 kilometers away from the boundary between Russia and Ukraine. As drones become more capable of traveling great distances, Vladimir Putin may quickly develop a crippling fear of appearing in public. He wrote in the caption next to, "If it is determined that Ukraine was responsible for the Kologna drone, then this would be the first time that a drone strike has been attempted in such close proximity to the capital of Ukraine since Russia's invasion of Ukraine more than a year ago." It was reported at the same time that Russian forces had shot down 2 Ukrainian drones in southern Russia by the Russian defense. The ministry accused Kiev of attempting to use drones to target civilian infrastructure in the Krasnodar region and in the ADI Republic, and added that these attempts were neutralized by electronic warfare units. Moscow has accused Ukraine of being the driving force behind attacks on Russian military infrastructure during the conflict. However, Kiev has not substantiated this allegation. The Ukrainian armed forces refused to cooperate with, according to reports from Moscow. 3 persons were killed in December when a drone attack from Ukraine targeted an airbase in southern Russia used by bombers. Although the Ukrainian military did not issue an official admission of responsibility for the attack, a spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force named UT stated that the explosions were the product of Russian activity on Ukrainian T. A few short weeks ago, Russia made the accusation that Ukraine was responsible for a similar assault on the same airfield. This airfield is home to bombers that have carried out missile attacks on Ukraine. A number of explosions rocked a military base in Crimea in the month of August. This was interpreted as a substantial expansion of the conflict by Ukraine into Crimea, which was occupied by Russia after it annexed Ukraine in 2014. After the fact, Ukraine asserted that they were the ones responsible for the assault. On Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin gave orders to the Federal Security Service (FSB) to step up their operations against what he described as an increase in surveillance and sabotage coming from Ukraine and the West. He gave orders to the FSB to beef up security in Russian-occupied territories in eastern Ukraine, and they carried them. He stated that the troops that have been stationed at the border are responsible for stopping sabotage groups and preventing the passage of illegal weapons and ammunition. He stated that because Western special services have historically been very active in connection to Russia, we need to beef up our counterintelligence on a general level. They have now increased their attacks against us by deploying additional personnel, technological, and other resource. It is imperative that we act appropriately. On Tuesday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the country's fighter aircraft had participated in a training exercise in the country's western airspace. This news came several hours after the airspace over St. Petersburg was closed. Due to reports of an unidentified object, the leader of NATO Jens Stoltenberg has stated that Ukraine will join NATO in the long. But for the time being, the country needs to maintain its independence in the face of an incursion from Russia. For many years, Ukraine has pursued membership in the military alliance that is headed by the United States. After Russia invaded the country, President Volodymyr Zelensky requested for that request to be prioritized so that it could be dealt with more quickly. In the days following Russia's invasion, Ukraine also submitted an application to join the EU and was granted candidate status. In June, Mr. Stoltenberg made these remarks to the media while he was in Helsinki, the capital of Finland. During a visit to the city, he was there on an official visit to Finland. Allies of NATO have decided that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance. Mr. Stoltenberg, what is at stake right now is whether or not Ukraine can emerge victorious as an independent sovereign country. For many years, Ukraine has attempted to join the military alliance that is comprised of the United States of America, Canada, and 28 European countries. This is something that President Vladimir Putin of Russia has characterized as a threat to Russia's. Mr. Zelensky has been pushing for a fast-track accession, but it is unclear whether the alliance members will genuinely contemplate full membership even after the war is over, despite the fact that they have pledged their support during a press conference with the Finnish Prime Minister's son. Marine Stoltenberg stated that once the war is over, we need to guarantee that history doesn't repeat itself. It is not acceptable for President Putin to continue attacking neighbor. He is not planning for peace. Rather, he is planning for more war in order to achieve his goal of controlling Ukraine. According to the AFP news agency, he was quoted as stating a Russian tank column was destroyed by an explosion. The hamlet of Bakhmut is still the site of ongoing. The most recent statements indicate that an assault on the Russian tank convoy was carried out using the FGM-148 Javelin missiles that the United States had provided to Ukraine. 5 Russian tanks were destroyed by explosions caused by Ukrainian fighters on the other side. Drones operated by the Ukrainians attacked Russian trenches. A failed attempt by the Russian Solider to bring down the Ukrainian drone by shooting it down was. An unmanned aerial vehicle from Ukraine dropped explosives and hand grenades on Russian troops. Next news. The situation in the city of Bakhmut, which Russian forces in the east of Ukraine have been attempting to keep under siege for weeks while increasing the pressure to take it over. According to the commander of the Ukrainian forces defending the city, who described it as extremely tense by shutting off their supply lines, Russian soldiers and mercenaries working for Wagner are attempting to coerce Ukrainian soldiers into surrendering or fleeing the battle. Russia, which has not accomplished a significant success in the past 6 months of the occupation, which has completed the city and the event that they take over. The city will also take over the final city center in the Donetsk region. Wagner's soldiers continue their attacks. Alex Andersky, the commander of the Ukrainian land forces, issued a written statement in which he stated that despite his large losses, the enemy is attempting to break the defense forces of our soldiers by dispatching Wagner's best-trained troops and besieging the city. A footage depicting an Su-25 fighter aircraft flying over a Bakhmut city was also published by the Russian state news agency R. On the video, it can be heard that someone who was introduced as a mercenary soldier of Wagner said, "We are pleased to be ours," and that he gave them psychological support. Additionally, he is seen giving them a hug. On the other hand, it was reported that other facades of the region were fixed in the locations that the soldiers were occupying. The problem of the soil shifting was fixed when the weather got warmer, but the trenches and the lands changed into mud. Key statement from Russia. On the other hand, Dmitry Peskov, a spokesperson for the Kremlin, stated that there was no explanation provided regarding the negotiations with Ukraine. Peskov stated in reference to the Ukrainian issue that although it is feasible for it to be resolved through the use of the negotiating table, no one has seen any indication by Ukraine as of. Pico emphasized that Russia's accomplishment of Ukrainian OB objectives is a priority, and he stated there are some facts. Therefore, there are newly acquired territories in Russia. There is a constitution that the Russian Federation must never disregard, and the Russian side must never cede ground. Naturally, if the appropriate attitude is taken by both the Ukrainian government and the appropriate attitude is taken by the Ukrainian regime, this issue can be resolved at the negotiation table as well. Nevertheless, this is our top priority air attack alert. The attack warnings broadcast as a result of a cyber attack on some regional television stations in Russia instructed viewers to seek shelter as a result of an impending air attack on the country. In a statement that was released by the Ministry of Emergency, the pirates who had compromised the servers of certain television and radio stations in various regions of the country disseminated emergency messages. According to the statement, this information is incorrect and it is not. The RIA News Agency was among the transmissions that had incorrect information about Crimea, the symbol of a man who escaped to the shelter on television in the message. Now everyone is in shelters or broadcast in the videos that have been shared on social media. A siren from one of the radio channels yelled, "Attention, attention, there has been an alert for an airstrike. Everyone should seek shelter immediately." The messages, Switzerland's impartiality damages Ukraine. According to an article published in one of the most respected publications in the United States, The Wall Street Journal, Switzerland is making it difficult for the West to supply Ukraine with weapons. According to the report, Switzerland's long-standing policy of neutrality has been a barrier to the delivery of weaponry to countries that are members of NATO. Despite the fact that Switzerland has a significant capacity for the manufacturing of weapons, no country was permitted to export to Ukraine any weapon that contained components manufactured in Switzerland. In numerous occasions throughout the conflict, the president of the country in Aok Cassis declared that his nation would not furnish weapons Switzerland must support. Additionally, the Bernese government stopped Spain and Denmark from delivering Purina 3 military vehicles to Ukraine, along with air defense systems that contain components manufactured in Sweden. On the other hand, the Wall Street Journal reports that a special committee from Ukraine intends to modify this policy by traveling to Bern, which is the capital of Switzerland. There was no information provided about when the meeting would take. The chairman of the committee, Alexander Mersko, made the following assertions regarding Switzerland. They ought to do more to support Ukraine. Germany, one of the countries that purchased the most military ammunition from Switzerland, was reminded in the report that the Bern administration has been under pressure to change the attitude of impartiality since the beginning of the conflict. This pressure came from Germany. Will the Swiss parliament adopt a stance on the issue? Switzerland, which remained neutral throughout the two great world wars that occurred in the 20th century, contends that this policy cannot be exempted because it is a part of the constitutional order, and therefore cannot be changed. On the other hand, some members of parliament drafted a measure that paved the way for the re-export of Swiss-made weapons and military equipment currently held in the stockpiles of other countries to the Ukrainian military. However, the Wall Street Journal pointed out that even if the bill is accepted, it won't go into effect until at the earliest the following year, despite the fact that it has been written that it is not yet obvious whether this will pass through the PAR. It does not violate our impartiality to enable the re-export of Swiss materials. Terry Burkhardt, a member of the Liberal Party and one of the parliamentarians who worked on drafting the measure, told the Wall Street Journal rejecting it may destroy our arms industry. If we do not allow our allies to have access to the weapons that we produce, we will be able to put a stop to the production of weapons altogether. On the other hand, it was made clear that opponents of the measure included not only the anti-war Green Party in the country, but also groups on the political right, the center-left, and conservative. On the other hand, at the 53rd World Economic Forum that took place in Davos, Switzerland last month, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the mayor of Kiev, Vitali Klitschko, all called for the Bern administration to change the policy that they have been following. Finland is preparing for the Russian. In order to increase the level of protection offered along its boundary with Russia, Finland has started building a fence that will stretch for 200 kilometers, 124 miles. The Border Patrol has indicated that it will be 3 meters tall and topped with barbed wire. The boundary that Finland shares with Russia is 832 miles long, making it the longest in the European The majority of Finland's borders are protected by simple wooden fences at the current time. Due to an increase in the number of Russians attempting to avoid conscription in order to serve in Ukraine, Finland made the decision to construct the fence. On Tuesday, the Nordic nation made some progress toward joining the NATO coalition, bringing it one step. Its parliament has started debating a measure to speed up the country's bid, and a vote on the bill is scheduled to take place on Wednesday. The clearing of vegetation around the border crossing at Imatra began on Tuesday. Road construction and the installation of the barrier are scheduled to begin in March. Certain portions of the barrier will have night vision cameras, along with lights and loudspeakers installed in. Finland is trying to strengthen the eastern border. According to the border guard, a 3-kilometer trial to Imatra should be finished by the end of the month of June. In July, Finland passed new amendments to its Border Guard Act, which will enable for the construction of more robust fences. The present border fences are made of wood, and their primary purpose is to stop livestock from crossing into the other. Since Russia began its all-out invasion of Ukraine, Finland has been working to bolster security along its eastern boundary. After the order was given by President Vladimir Putin to mobilize reservists to fight in Ukraine, a significant number of Russians began to flee to Finland in the month of September after maintaining their neutral status for a number of years prior to Russia's invasion on February 24th of the previous. Finland and Sweden came to the conclusion that they desired to become members of NATO as quickly as possible. The procedure of Finland joining NATO was sped up in order to speed up the process of joining NATO. The meetings of the Finnish parliament have begun. After the Russian occupation of Ukraine, one of the European countries that shares the longest land boundary with Russia, Finland, along with Sweden, petitioned to become a member of NATO for a significant amount of time in order to guarantee its own safety. On the other hand, the administration in Helsinki, which had to contend with fewer international roadblocks than Sweden, gave indications that it would move forward with membership-related actions before the elections that were scheduled to take place before the elections on April 2nd. The members of the Finnish parliament made the necessary steps to ensure that the draft law ratifying their acceptance of the NATO contract was passed. It is anticipated that the measure will not face significant opposition and be passed. The very first thing that Finland wishes to do is join NATO together with Sweden. But this step of parliament was interpreted as meaning that Helsinki can continue down the road by threatening machines in Ukraine. The Admiral Makarov is Russia's flagship in the Black Sea, and this slender boat, which is dodging bullets as it makes its way over the choppy waters off the coast of Crimea, is on a mission to assault it. We see a flash just as it gets close to the ship and the live stream is cut off. This was very much like a commando assault, but not in the way that you are probably thinking. There are no specially trained elite troops. This assault on Russian ships stationed in the port of Sevastopol was carried out by a swarm of drones, of which there were 9 in the air and 7 on the water. We know that the drone we see in the video was created using a regular commercial jet ski because a model with very identical characteristics was found. Washed up further south along the coast of the Crimean Sea, this seaborne drone that was made for a relatively low cost taking on Russia's most advanced Black Sea fleet frigate is an example of a wider shift that is taking place in the way that wars are conducted. This is one way in which sophisticated mobile robotics is altering the dynamics of contemporary warfare. This picture was taken in Kiev on the morning of October 17. Drones are flying overhead and zipping through the air. A buzzing sound can be heard and then a significant detonation can be heard after that. This is just one of approximately 28 attacks that were initiated the day against the capital of Ukraine. Russia has been using Shahed-136 drones, also known as kamikaze drones, which were manufactured in Iran to target Ukrainian military positions and vehicles, as well as to terrorize civilians and disable important infrastructure. As its alias moped suggests, the Shahed-136 is not exceptionally advanced in terms of its technological capabilities because it is powered by an engine similar to that of a lawnmower. It generates a distinctively noisy buzzing sound. Each drone is armed with a payload that weighs more than 80 pounds, which is more than sufficient to cause significant deaths. In addition, in terms of military weaponry, they are quite affordable, costing only approximately $20,000 each. On the other hand, each of Russia's caliber cruise missiles, which were utilized extensively by Moscow throughout the conflict, cost approximately $1 million. To this point, Ukraine has been successful in shooting down hundreds of these drones. However, the reason Russia has been so successful in employing these machines is that they have a large range and can be launched in large numbers from the rear of a truck. This has the potential to successfully overwhelm air defenses, as only 1 or 2 of the enemy's aircraft need to get through in order to destroy their unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, are being used by multiple countries, not just Russia, in order to achieve a tactical advantage on the battleground. the Ukraine frequently uses unmanned aerial vehicles for purposes, including reconnaissance, surveillance, and assault. The Ukrainians attacked the Russian forces that were occupying Snake Island with Turkish-made Bar-Actor TB2S and modified quadcopters, which they used to drop grenades on Russian infantry that was unaware of the impending assault and other targets. In the second battle over Nagorno-Karabakh, which took place in 2020, Azerbaijan had an advantage thanks to the Israeli-made II because of the influence of armed drones. The Ethiopian National Army was able to turn around a dramatic rout at the hands of Tigrayan troops. In the year 2021, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Iran have emerged at the forefront of UAV production and are providing many nations with an alternative route to acquiring this technology without having to rely on the United States or Europe, which have grown reluctant to continue there. Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Iran have all emerged as leaders in the UAV industry. In the meantime, Taiwan has recently revealed its very own kamikaze drones amid ongoing tensions with China, and has announced an investment of $1.6 billion in the domestic production of armed drones. The arming of multipurpose robots was the impetus for leading businesses in the robotics industry to sign an open letter expressing grace. In China, a robot dog, also known as a quadrille with a machine gun attached to its back, was seen being transported by a drone. Additionally, this picture shows a modified quadrille firing a machine gun at a shooting practice in Russia in spite of the fact that these modified devices are not yet a frequent sight on the battlefield. Similar military models are currently being. The yearly conference of the Association of the United States Army will feature displays such as this one in 2021. Many armed forces have already made investments in a wide variety of drones, unmanned weapons, and other AI-powered machines, despite the fact that there is a growing call to introduce greater controls over the production, distribution, and use of these types of devices. These machines are expected to increasingly find their way onto the battlefields of the Russian transport was obliterated by HIMARS missiles. A significant number of Russian convoys were destroyed by USARS missiles fired by the Ukrainian forces. It is impossible for Russian armored vehicles and tanks to defend themselves against HIMARS projectiles. The Russian convoy that was transporting reinforcement and ammunition to the city of Bakhmut yesterday came under assault from Ukrainian army forces using USMRS missiles. After the massive detonation, the tanks and armored vehicles that were part of the convoy were rendered useless. It is impossible for Soviet-era tanks to compete successfully against American HIMARS missiles because of their outdated On the other side, Ukrainian drones were dispatched to Russian soldiers who had made it through the attack unscathed. The Ukrainian drones chased after the Russian fighters who had escaped.